You know, Johann, said Hemingway, they keep bringing up accusations against me, too. Instead of reading my books, they're writing books about me. They say that I didn't love my wives, that I didn't pay enough attention to my son, that I punched a critic on the nose, that I lied, that I wasn't sincere, that I was conceited, that I was macho, that I claimed I had received 230 war wounds, whereas actually it was only 210, that I abused myself, that I disobeyed my mother. That's immortality, said Goethe. Immortality means eternal trial. If it's eternal trial, there ought to be a decent judge, not a narrow-minded school teacher with a rod in her hand. A rod in the hand of a narrow-minded teacher. That's what eternal trial is about. What else did you expect, Ernest? I didn't expect anything. I had hoped that after death, I would at last be able to live in peace. You did everything you could to become immortal. Nonsense, I wrote books, that's all. Yes, precisely, laughed Goethe. I have no objection to my books being immortal. I wrote them in such a way that nobody could delete a single word, to resist every kind of adversity. But I myself, as a human being, as Ernest Hemingway, I don't give a damn about immortality. I understand you very well, Ernest, but you should have been more careful while you were still alive. Now it's too late. More careful? Are you referring to my boastfulness? I admit that when I was young, I loved to blow my own trumpet. I loved to show off in front of people. I enjoyed the anecdotes that were told about me, but believe me, I wasn't such a monster as to do it on account of immortality. When I realized one day that this was the point of it all, I panicked. From that time on, I must have told people 1,000 times to leave my life alone. But the more I pleaded, the worse it got. I moved to Cuba to get out of their sight. When I won the Nobel Prize, I refused to go to Stockholm. Believe me, I didn't give a damn about immortality, and now I'll tell you something else. When I realized one day that it was holding me in its clutches, it terrified me more than death itself. A man can take his own life, but he cannot take his own immortality. As soon as immortality has you aboard, you can't get off, and even if you shoot yourself, you'll stay on deck along with your suicide, and that's horrible, Johann. That's horrible. I was lying dead on the deck, and I saw my 4 wives squatting around me, writing down everything they knew, and standing behind them was my son, and he was scribbling too. And that old Dame Gertrude Stein was there, writing away, and all my friends were there, blabbing out all the indiscretions and slanders they had ever heard about me. And behind them, 100 journalists with microphones jostled one another, and an army of university professors all over America was busy classifying, analyzing, and shoveling everything into articles and books. Chapter 16. Hemingway was trembling, and Goethe clutched his arm. Calm down, Ernest. Calm down, my friend. I understand you. What you've just been telling me reminds me of my dream. It was my last dream. After that, I had no more. Or else they were confused, and I could no longer distinguish them from reality. Imagine a small puppet theater. I am behind the scenes. I control the puppets and recite the text. It is a performance of Faust, my Faust. Did you know that Faust is at its most beautiful when performed as a puppet play? That's why I was so happy that no actors were present, and I alone recited the lines, which on that day sounded more beautiful than ever before. And then I suddenly glanced at the seats and saw that the theater was empty. That puzzled me. Where was the audience? Was my Faust so boring that everyone had gone home? Was I not even worth booing? Bewildered, I turned around and I was aghast. I expected them out front, and instead they were at the back of the stage, gazing at me with wide-open, inquisitive eyes. As soon as my glance met theirs, they began to applaud. And I realized that my Faust didn't interest them at all, and that the show they wished to see was not the puppets I was leading around the stage, but me myself. Not Faust, but Goethe. And then I was overcome by a sense of horror very similar to what you described a moment ago. I felt they wanted me to say something, but I couldn't. My throat felt locked tight. I put down the puppets and left them lying on the brightly lit stage that nobody was watching. I tried to maintain a dignified composure, I walked silently to the coat rack where my hat was hanging. I put it on my head, and without a glance at all those curiosity seekers, I left the theater and went home. I tried to look neither to the right nor to the left, and especially not behind me, because I knew they were following. I unlocked the heavy front door and slammed it behind me. I found an oil lamp and lit it. I lifted it with my shaking arm and went to my study, hoping that my rock collection would help me to forget this unpleasant episode. But before I had time to put the lamp down on the table, I happened to glance at the window. Their faces were pressed against the glass. Then I realized that I would never get rid of them. Never, never, never. I realized that the lamp was lighting up my face. I saw it by those wide open eyes that were scrutinizing me. I put out the lamp, and yet I knew that I shouldn't have done so. Now they realized that I was trying to hide from them, that I was afraid of them, and this was sure to incite them all the more. But by now my fear was stronger than my reason, and I ran off into the bedroom, pulled the covers off the bed, threw them over my head, stood in the corner of the room, and pressed myself against the wall. Chapter 17. Hemingway and Goethe are receding down the roads of the other world, and you ask me what was the point of bringing the two together. After all, they don't belong together at all. They have nothing in common. So what? With whom do you think Goethe would like to pass his time in the other world? With Herder? With Hölderlin? With Bettina? With Eckermann? Just think of Agnes. Think of her terror when she imagined that she might have to hear once again the hum of women's voices that she hears every Saturday in the sauna. She does not wish to spend her afterlife with Paul or with Bridget. Why should Goethe long for Herder? I can tell you, though it's practically blasphemy, that he didn't even long for Schiller. He would never have admitted this to himself while he was alive, because it would make for a sad summing up not to have had a single great friend in one's lifetime. Schiller was undoubtedly the person dearest to him, but the word dearest only means that he was dearer to him than all others, who, frankly speaking, were not so very dear to him at all. They were his contemporaries. He hadn't chosen them. He hadn't even chosen Schiller. When he realized one day that he'd have them around him all his life, he felt a pang of anxiety. There was nothing to be done. He had to come to terms with it. But was there any reason for being with them after death? It was therefore only out of my most sincere love for him that I dreamed up someone at his side who interested him very much. In case you have forgotten, let me remind you that Goethe was fascinated by America throughout his life. Someone who wasn't like the band of pale-faced romantics that came to dominate Germany toward the end of his life. You know, Johann, said Hemingway, it's a stroke of luck that I can be with you. You make everybody tremble with respect, and so all my wives, as well as old Gertrude Stein, are giving me a wide berth. Then he burst out laughing. Unless, of course, it is on account of that unbelievable scarecrow get-up of yours. In order to make Hemingway's remark intelligible, I have to explain that immortals on their walks in the other world can choose to look the way they did at any time in their lives. And Goethe chose the private look of his last years. Nobody except those closest to him knew him in that guise. Because his eyes were sensitive to light, he wore a green eye shade attached to his forehead by a piece of string. He had slippers on his feet, and a heavy, stripy wool scarf was tied around his neck because he was afraid of catching cold. The remark about his unbelievable scarecrow get-up made Goethe laugh happily, as if Hemingway had just said some words of great praise. He leaned close to him and said softly, I put on this get-up mainly because of Bettina. Wherever she goes, she talks of her great love for me, so I want people to witness the object of that love. Whenever she sees me, she runs for her life. And I know she stamps her feet in fury because I parade around this way, toothless, bald, and with this ridiculous gadget over my eyes.